So pleased to welcome our next guest. He's the president and CEO of the Alliance for the Great Lakes. Joel Brammeier, headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, is with an organization that's focused on the protection of the waters in the Great Lakes since 1970. Joel, welcome. So nice to have you here on Business Life 360, and we have so much to discuss.
Very glad to be here.
So let's start with the big picture of the 5 awe-inspiring Great Lakes. How much fresh water do they have, and how much surface do they cover?
So this is the most incredible, unique freshwater system in the world. In fact, there's so much water in the Great Lakes region that it supplies drinking water to more than 40 million people in the United States and Canada. There's really nowhere else in the world where this many people live this close to this much easily accessible fresh water. So it's pretty incredible. And it's a big place too. The Great Lakes region, if you think about it as covering 8 states, 2 provinces, and 2 countries, from Duluth, Minnesota in the far west to Montreal on the St. Lawrence River is more than 1,000 miles. And the freshwater system keeps going even after that. So it's enormous. It serves tens of millions of people. And it's really just a globally unique resource that is very much worth protecting.
Absolutely. Now, what about those who work near the Great Lakes? Do you have any quantification on businesses and those who are working along those those borders?
So historically, the Great Lakes economy is really built on 3 pillars. It's agriculture, it's manufacturing, and it's tourism. The last one is the one that, I enjoy the most because I get to get outside and enjoy the Great Lakes. But really, these big parts of the Great Lakes economy are just critically important to both the present and the future of the region. So there's been a lot of economic demand on the Great Lakes over the last couple of centuries, and we've felt the impacts. Frankly, there's been a lot of pollution and damage done to the region. We're in the process of cleaning that up and kind of rebooting, what it means to be a business oriented near the Great Lakes and making this a very attractive and welcoming place for people who are here now and for people who may want to come here in the future.
So talk to us a little bit more about those businesses that you previously brought up around the Great Lakes. Has there been initiative or regulations to curtail the toxic runoff at the end of their pipes and the things that they've historically been doing and kind of dumping into the Great Lakes?
Well, often when people think about pollution, the first thing they think of is the end of a pipe. And so here in the Great Lakes region, there's a pretty incredible industrial legacy. We manufactured steel for the country. We obviously have manufactured cars for the country. And that legacy brought with it a lot of economic vitality. It also brought with it a lot of environmental damage. And so much of the pollution that went into the lakes as a result of that manufacturing legacy sat there for decades in hot spots of pollution at the bottom of rivers and harbors and lakes across the region. Unfortunately, after many decades, a lot of that pollution is in the process of being cleaned up. And a lot of the manufacturers that are still here are pretty tightly regulated. In addition to being a manufacturing hub, we are an incredible center for farming here in the Great Lakes because of great soil and easy access to fresh water that's relatively cheap for farming. With that, though, comes overloads of fertilizer and manure that gets washed off the land and washed into the water. And unfortunately, that leads to algae blooms, some of which can be toxic, some so toxic that in 2014, a whole metro area's Toledo's drinking water system was actually shut down because it couldn't supply safe, non-toxic drinking water to its residents. And that was a big wake-up call for the region. We're kind of in this process of cleaning up the old pollution from the 20th century manufacturing, and then realized we actually still can't always provide safe drinking water to our residents because of these algal blooms and pollution from farms. That was a big red flag, as are some of the other challenges you mentioned.
So as we talk about that incident in 2014, how far have we come since then in terms of making adjustments and enhancements and assuring, if you will, that that will never happen again to our drinking water?
A couple of things have happened. We've realized how widespread this toxic algae bloom problem is. It's not just a Lake Erie problem, but it's happening across the Great Lakes region in waters big and small. So Green Bay, Saginaw Bay, upstate New York, and lots of other smaller water bodies throughout the Great Lakes are experiencing these algae blooms. There's still a lot of work to be done and a need for both more resources, but also more protections and regulations.
Well, let's shift gears and talk now about invasive species that are in the Great Lakes right now. So in terms of invasive species, how did they get into the Great Lakes in the first place? And how do we get them out of there? Or do we get them out of there?
Unfortunately, since the 19th century, as the region opened up to other parts of the world, there were more opportunities for animals and plants that can survive in fresh water in other parts of the globe to come here. And the Great Lakes have really become known as ground zero for freshwater invasions globally. We care about this because invasive species, by definition, are able to do better at breeding and feeding and taking over habitats than some native fish and wildlife that we really rely on.
The Alliance for the Great Lakes, your alliance, has championed advocacy campaigns. I know it's everything from adopting a beach cleanup to reducing plastic usage and even maybe focusing on marinas. What are some other ways that we can all do so and really contribute to that?
Well, first, I encourage anybody who wants to get involved in protecting water in the Great Lakes, just look around locally and figure out what the big issues are there. And I will guarantee there's going to be a group of people in your community that's working to address that. And I encourage people to contact your decision makers. And as long as we can continue to raise up those challenges and make sure that we're addressing, those needs across the region, I think the Great Lakes will be on track for being this globally unique, really incredible freshwater resource that we all know, in our hearts that it is.
Well, thanks so much for joining us and for your expertise and all you do at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. You are doing great things to protect our precious lakes. Thanks so much for being on Business Life 360.
Thank you.